Hello, Dr. Tandoh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, dear participants. You're welcome to our June edition of the IEPA-UCC webinar series. I know today it's July, but this is the June edition, which was pushed forward to make way for some contingency planning, both for us as an institute and also for our research person. Today, we're going to look at a very interesting topic, improving outcomes, setting the tone on positive student behavior and discipline. The person to do us the honors for today is a man who has been spearheading educational reforms in Ghana, in the person of Dr. Kwabena Tandoh. He's the Deputy Director General, Quality and Access at the Ghana Education. It's just a minute past 2 o'clock on my time. I'm just going to give a few minutes, 2-3 minutes to our latecomers, because I see others joining in. Then we can go into full swing for today's webinar. So kindly bear with us. Let's give our latecomers just a few minutes for them to join. Then we will go on with our webinar series today. Thank you very much, and thanks for your patience. Okay, so I think my 3 minutes is up. So thanks for your patience and welcome once again. So our topic for discussion today is improving outcomes, setting the tone on positive students' behavior and discipline. Now, this is how the program is going to go. My name is Nana Roxon. I'm the head of Communications and Public Relations at the Institute of Public Relations, Institute for Educational Planning and Administration at the University of Cape Coast, the UNESCO Catholic Center. And as usual, I'm your moderator for today. For the benefit of those joining us for the first time, I'm going to give you a brief on who we are at IEPA, then take you through how the event is going to go. Then I'll introduce the speaker for today, then hand over the platform for him to deliver his PowerPoint presentation on the topic. Then at the end of his presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session where if you have questions, comments, you can do that. Now, a little bit about who we are at IEPA. So IEPA for short stands for the Institute for Educational Planning and Administration. And this was established in August 1975 based on a joint agreement between the government of Ghana and UNESCO and the UNDP to build and strengthen capacity in educational planning and administration of experts and non-experts, and to inform educational policy formulation and implementation through research. So this has been the core of the Institute for the past 45 years and counting. Now, in November 2020, IEPA officially became a UNESCO Category 2 Center for Excellence for West Africa. And this was launched by the Honorable Minister of Education in June 2021. As a UNESCO Category 2 Center, IEPA is to, among other things, build capacity of the workforce in the education sector, in the West African sub-region, in the areas of educational planning, leadership and administration, as well as mobilize international and regional experts to provide technical assistance and policy advice to support sector-wide planning and policy development in West Africa. So this webinar series is one of such events to build capacity geared towards SDG 4. If you want more information on what we do at IEPA, educational programs and research and advocacy programs, kindly visit us at www.iepa.ucc.edu.au to learn more from us. Now we are using the webinar Zoom version for this webinar series. So if you want to make a comment or ask a question, kindly use the Q&A button or the chat button to make your comment or to ask your question as the presentation goes on. Now, let me give you a little background of who our presenter is for today. And he's the person of Dr. Kwabena Tandoh. He's the Deputy Director General for Quality Analysis at the Ghana Education Service. Prior to being appointed to the GES, he was a consultant with the World Bank, serving as the instructional coordinator on the Secondary Education Improvement Project. His experience in education spans more than 2 decades with national and international experts. He served as the Executive Director for Schools for Anglo-Gold Ashanti Schools in Obuasi. While serving with Anglo-Gold Ashanti, Dr. Tandoh established the Williams and Bruce School as a Cambridge accredited school. He has also worked as the principal for Rising Sun Montessori School, lead consultant and executive director of Godwin College, Ghana, an American college in East Hartford, Connecticut. He also served as the vice principal for academic and student affairs for CTC International Schools in Lagos, Nigeria. Dr. Tandoh served for 3 years as a program coordinator for the Human Service Program at St. Louis Community College in the USA, where he also held the position of a full-time faculty member. Since 1999, Dr. Tandoh has been a UNESCO Comparative Human Rights Ambassador and Fellow, and served as a junior facilitator in the UNESCO Human Rights Intergenerational Forum in the USA in 2009. In 2010 and 2011, he served as a senior facilitator in the UNESCO Human Rights Intergenerational Forum in Rwanda and Italy, respectively. Dr. Tandoh holds a Master's of Social Work with a focus in social development and clinical practice from the University of Connecticut. His PhD work is from St. Louis University in Higher Education, Leadership, and Administration. He also holds a bachelor's degree in Urban and Community Planning. Dr. Tandoh holds a number of professional memberships and associations, including the Council on Social Work Education, National Association of Black School Workers, and Association of International Educators, and the American College Personnel Association. So that's a resource person for today. And I know, personally, have learned a lot from him, and I know he's going to share his wealth of experience with that. Whilst he's about to do that, let me quickly remind you that at the end of this webinar and this presentation, if you want your certificate, you can kindly send us an email, the same email that confirmed your registration to this webinar, and certificate is for 100 Ghana cedis. Send us by Vodafone Cash to 0505221029, and our till number is 3744145. Or just send us an email and we will liaise with you on how you can get your certificate. Please know that the certificate is only a digital one, and that if we should arrange postage and delivery, that will be at your own cost. Now, for those who keep asking if the certificate can be used for CPD, especially when it comes to teacher training, yes, you can use the certificate as part of your CPD documents when you're presenting it. And we are still working with the council to see how many points our certificates are allocated. So distinguished participants, all is set for the presentation today. Thank you for your time, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over the platform to Dr. Tandoh to start his presentation. Dr. Tandoh, we are ready for you. Your audience are with you. Thank you. Dr. Tandoh, we can hear you. I don't know if you're talking. We can see your screen.
Thank you, Nanefwa. And thank you to IEPA for the opportunity and the invitation to present for the webinar for June, even though today is July 6, 2023. As the introduction was said, I'm going to be presenting on the topic improving outcomes. I know that over the past few years, as an education sector, especially in pre-tertiary education, we have been spending a lot of time focusing on educational outcomes and ensuring that students are improving their learning outcomes as they come through our institutions. But we also do know that there has been a lot of conversation recently in the media, both in social media as well as in the traditional print and other media, around issues of indiscipline among students and how that has become a challenge in ensuring that we are improving learning outcomes in our schools. And we do know that when there is indiscipline, it usually would impact a lot on how schools are organized and how schools operate. So my topic today, I will be focusing on how do we improve outcomes, and specifically, how do we as educational institutions set a tone for positive student behavior and discipline in our schools. Now, for the purpose of this presentation, my outline would focus on discipline and indiscipline. What does it really mean? And I will just also discuss a bit about some of the recent issues of indiscipline in our schools. Then after I discuss some of the issues of indiscipline in general, I will talk about the effects of indiscipline on the school culture and the school ethos and students, as well as the entire school community. And then we will quickly discuss why some students act out and what are the causes of indiscipline, what are some of the things that generally may contribute to indiscipline in our schools. Then what I would do is to focus, while there are lots of other solutions, I want to focus on how do you set the tone to ensure that you minimize indiscipline and have more of a focused and school environment. And so I would use lessons from air travel as what are the lessons we can draw from air travel to set the tone in our educational institutions and environments to stimulate positive learning outcomes and positive student behavior. And then we can discuss, I am an executive, I am the Deputy Director General of Ghana Education Service. So obviously we will discuss what is next, especially in the GES, as well as what can be next for other educational institutions outside the GES. And then I would leave room for questions and answers. My understanding is that I have about 35 or 40 minutes to do the presentation. So I would start quickly by what is discipline, or what is, for that matter, what is indiscipline? And if you look in the dictionary, specifically, discipline is always talking about how do you ensure that people obey rules or some kind of code of behavior or code of conduct. How are people following whatever rules, code of conduct, and things that are set out for them? And how do you ensure that when people are not following those rules and those code of behavior or code of conduct, that you use appropriate, in the dictionary's term, punishment, but I would rather you look at it as corrective measures for disobedience, or to ensure that people continue to be disciplined. I think it's important that for the context of our education, issues of indiscipline is not a new thing. It is not something that has just started in our schools as a result of our current educational policies or environments. I am also of the view that it has actually not even increased. It is barely because we now have a lot more technology and media to really push stories to the forefront and to get people to focus more on what is happening in our schools. I think for some of us who went to school either in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even into the 1990s, before social media became the order of the day, we can all attest to the fact that student demonstrations over food, students, vandalizing school property, students attacking teachers, they were happening. It was just that when something happened in my hometown of Goso, that it was going to take sometimes a few weeks before it would be heard of in Accra. But in today's day and age, because of our growth in technology and instant media through social media, as well as the traditional media, as soon as something happens in one side of the world, we're able to hear it on the other side of the world. So the issues around indiscipline and discipline in schools have become to the forefront and to our foreminds because of advances in technology, advances in our communication. Now, issues of indiscipline would usually lead in the context of schools. It may lead to either absenteeism or truancy, where you would have students who are absenting themselves from school or skipping class. So they are present in school, but they are not attending either classes or attending scheduled school activities. And then truancy, where students may say they are leaving home to come to school and they will not show up in school, or they may leave for boarders, may leave the dormitory, but you will not see them in class. So discipline or indiscipline or misbehavior of students lead to some of these things. One of the key things is that it also leads to bullying of fellow students, junior students, both in terms of psychological bullying, emotional, sometimes physical, as well as in our present day, cyberbullying, where students are bullying their fellow students online. And we also sometimes, even in recent times, see bullying of staff, teaching and non-teaching staff. And so indiscipline leads to some of this. It is clear, as I mentioned earlier, that indiscipline, sometimes because it leads to student unrest, may lead to vandalism through student unrest, or sometimes it doesn't even have to come in the form of student unrest that leads to vandalism. But indiscipline in students is what has led us to see all these statements on our classroom walls. You know, Stone Gapito was here some, you know, Kotokroba have been here too, and all those things where students vandalize school property, they vandalize their fellow students' property. It is all as a measure or as a result of indiscipline or misbehavior in students. Then we see clear violations of disobedience of their prefects and seniors in school, disobedience of staff and adults and teachers within our schools, as well as clear violation of laid down rules and regulations as a result of indiscipline. Then, of course, we would also see students who will go to the extent of taking other people's property as a form of indiscipline. And then indiscipline sometimes also lead to sexual relations, sexual harassment, sexual and other immoral behavior that we do not usually expect in our schools. Before I proceed, though, I wish to also mention the fact that while we focus a lot on student indiscipline, there is a lot to be said for staff indiscipline as well. We do, as Ghana Education Service, and I know in other institutions, have major issues with staff discipline, staff not doing exactly what is expected of them. So indiscipline in general is not only limited to the students, but to the entire school community. We have had issues of even parents being indisciplined. So it is an entire issue of the school community, from the side of the school represented by its staff, both teaching and non-teaching staff. The students themselves will represent a bulk of this triangular relationship, as well as parents. So it's important to conceptualize the indiscipline in our school from all these dimensions. Now, research was done by Ofori in 2009, where he looked at major respondents in terms of people's perceptions and opinions around indiscipline. And a majority of the opinions of people in our schools, the perception of people in our schools, is that the majority feel that most of the students that cause indiscipline or are involved in indiscipline acts tend to come from low socioeconomic homes. And so the research was making a connection between a student's background and what is happening at home and how it may reflect in their behavior or their levels of misbehavior within schools. So it's important to also look at the background students are coming from and how can we ensure that we focus on helping students to grow when they enter our school environments. Now, in terms of the effects of indiscipline, it is important to understand that, especially for the purpose of school and ensuring that we have a well-oiled machine within our educational institutions, it affects the ability of teachers to teach effectively, and for that matter, reduces teaching time because teachers spend time trying to manage misbehavior within their classroom or outside the classroom. Indiscipline would usually lead to high dropout rates among students, as well as poor performance, academic and other performance among students in school. And then there are usually higher occurrence of student demonstrations or student riots that lead to property damage, both school damage as school property as well as staff property. And then sometimes low enrollment in schools which have high incidence of indiscipline. So usually when there are high incidents of indiscipline, we would usually tend to see that in subsequent years, especially if the schools have had a lot more reports of indiscipline and bad news, you see a lot more schools, a lot more students not choosing or selecting such schools to go to. Now, in all of this, why are students acting out? Why are there high levels of indiscipline among students? We know there are a number of things that contribute to it. And the first key thing is that there is ambiguity when students come to school. They are unaware of exactly what is expected of them. I know a lot of our schools may give students code of conduct. They may tell students the do's and don'ts. Seniors in the schools will tell students about the do's and don'ts. But still, we still have high levels of unambiguity or ambiguity, sorry, within our schools. Because we are not going through formalized orientation processes that helps our students to really situate themselves within the environment that they find themselves. We know based on research that attention-seeking and acceptance, also attention-seeking behavior leads to indiscipline. So when students feel they don't have the right attention, either from teachers or from their peers, they may act out, or there may be higher incidence of indiscipline in such students who are seeking attention from people that they believe they are not getting that attention from. Research has also shown that indiscipline is also as a result of low self-esteem or self-esteem issues among students. And for that matter, students may misbehave in an effort to either get attention or boost, or in their head, boost their self-esteem. There is also a lot of research evidence to show that dysfunction at home or the immediate social network of the student sometimes lead to indisciplines in school. And I think this points to Ofori's research in my earlier slide, that people from low socio economic homes and backgrounds, and sometimes that may be connected to some dysfunction in the home, whether it is a psychological dysfunction, instability in the home, may lead to indiscipline, as well as instability in the student's immediate social environment. And then, of course, there are students who may have developmental issues, both physical and especially mental health issues that need to be addressed. And sometimes students may have attention deficit disorders or attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. And because we are unable to diagnose it, we may misinterpret it as this student is just a bad child or is not paying attention in class. So there are also issues of developmental trajectories of growth that may contribute to indiscipline. While all of these are key, and I'm not going to be able to discuss all of the things we should do for all of these areas that contribute to student indiscipline. I want to spend my presentation focusing on especially the first key area around ensuring that there is no ambiguity for students, which helps them to focus. And in doing so, I want to take lessons from air travel. And I'll be very quick. I hope that in doing this, it will help us to wrap our heads around what can we do as an institution, educational institution, either in any of our schools, around lessons we can draw from the process of air travel and how that contributes to ensuring that we set the right tones to improve outcomes amongst our students. So for some of us that have had the opportunity to experience air travel, whether domestic or international, there are a number of things that we go through. And the first thing is what I call positioning. And in terms of education, the enrollment drive, the airlines do not yet have the passenger. There are a number of airlines, even domestic air travel in Ghana now. We have 2 with additional ones looking to come on stream. If you look at regional travel, we have a number of airline companies. And then if you look in terms of international travel, there are multiple options. So how does a student make a decision about which school? In the context of, say, moving into senior high school, we have about 700 senior high schools. So positioning, and if you look what airlines will usually do, they will sell themselves. They have the best in business class. They have the best safety record. They have the best, they have the best hostess in terms of once you get online into the plane, the service. So they will sell different parts of why you should select them for your travel, because you have options. And so the same in terms of education. For schools must begin to look at what sets us apart as a school. What is our competitive edge? Is it the fact that we are really good in sports? Is it the fact that we are well known for science? We have solid business programs. Is it the fact that we are solid in terms of quiz competitions? We are very good in terms of other competitions. We have the best agric science program. So schools need to begin to sell to students what sets them apart. What is a competitive edge? What are you going to get when you come to our school? What programs do we offer, as I discussed earlier? What is the reason why you should come to our school? Is it because we have history? You know, our institution has trained some of the best in the country and across the world. Our history is that we have been around for hundreds of years. And so we have the know-how of training students. We have, you know, our school ethos allows students to be able to work well. We have a strong Catholic tradition or Methodist tradition or Ahmadiyya tradition. We have a very strong base, and that is what our school ethos is all about. We are focused on certain key principles that makes us who we are. Those are important in terms of positioning the institution or the school even before the student comes in. And, you know, what are our achievements, academic achievements, sports achievements, other competitions, and the likes? Those are very, very important. And then what type of networks do you come? When you attend our school, these are our community networks, our corporate networks. These are the places that our students are going to for tertiary education. These are the kind of old students we have, and that's the strength. So all of these things are important for positioning of schools and setting the tone even before your student gets there. Then once you set the tone, obviously the student makes the decision. In airline travel, after you look at the fare, you look at cost and all those things, based on your own travel arrangements, you make a decision. And so the student selection. After schools or institutions have positioned themselves well, then of course the students will either select the school during the school selection process, either through self-placement, seeking for protocol, and sometimes students may become more impacted by another school and may request for transfer. So so at any given point, the idea is to attract the students that you need, and then use your positioning to make sure that the students will make a decision or select your institution. Once a student makes a decision and selects your institution, then we get into the admissions process. For airlines, it's about what are all of the things that the airlines will do for you after you buy your tickets, even before the first or even before the time of your travel. They will send you information about when you must arrive at the airport, what you must have in your bags, what are not permitted in your bags, how much your bag must weigh, when the check-in counter will close, and all those things. And in air travel, once you miss those deadlines, obviously you will miss that flight. So the same thing for us. Once a student selects our school, our prospectus, is it clear? Is it communicating to the student in terms of what exactly is expected of them on the first day of school, what they must bring, what they must not bring, what is the school going to provide to them, and everything? What the enrollment process is going to be like, what should they expect, what is clear. If the student doesn't meet all of the requirements for enrollment, how are we going to provide them the right service during that time? And then in terms of the enrollment process, how do we assign classes to students? How do we provide learning materials that students are entitled to them? How do we assign them to a house or to a dormitory? Even for day students, they are assigned to houses. So how do we ensure that that process is smooth and the student understands exactly what that process is? And then what type of orientation will we provide that student once they come to school? A well-organized orientation beyond the admissions process. Now, once a student comes for the prospectus and everything and going through the admissions process, in airline, after that, you are given a boarding pass. And your boarding pass is very detailed. If you look at the one that I have displayed here, it shows the name of the person, the flight that they are supposed to be on. So for that matter, the name of the student, what class they are in, everything, the date they are supposed to arrive, where they are going, where they need to be, where they are coming from, where they are going to end up, when they are supposed to be at the gate for boarding, and all those things. So it is very clear, and there is no ambiguity when a person receives their boarding pass in terms of what to do next. So for us, how do we guide the student through our documentation and process to make sure that there is no ambiguity for that particular student, and for that matter, every student who enters an institution? So clear information that we give to that student, printed. Sometimes we rattle and give students a lot of oral information, but clear printed information that the student can refer to. There is no ambiguity at all in it. What timetable are you giving them? What does that timetable say? What is expected of them when? What time is lunch? What time is dinner? When does breakfast begin? When is rising bell? All those things. And then schools usually should provide students with very clear code of conduct for students, and then not only providing it to those students, but taking them through it on the first few days of school. I am a big proponent of the fact that any school that begins academic activity on the first or second day of school has already failed. The first or second day of school is really to help the student acclimate themselves to the ethos of the school, the traditions of the school, the environment of the school, the rules and regulations of the school, clear consequences for when students violate very clear defined rules and regulations. And then once those are very clear to a student, then you begin to ensure that you have set a particular tone for how students should come into your school. Then usually from the boarding pass, the person will go through security. And security is where the aviation industry will check what they have already told you is expected of you. So the same thing, once all of these things are done for the student, the day the students report to school, the day the student is moving in, just checking to make sure the student has all of the items that they have been asked to bring, whether they're a boarding student or a day student, before the student finally settles into the school. It again helps the student to understand that what you have told them you are going to do, you have not just told them, but you are going to have multiple layers of checks to make sure that it is clearly done. It sends that message to the student. It also sends that message to the parents about the fact that standards will be maintained. And those are very important. Then once the student comes to the school, once you're on board the plane, for most of us, we've had the opportunity for air travel. Once you get onto the plane, there is no ambiguity in terms of what you need to do. You know exactly where your bulk carry-on items must go. You know where your small items must go. You are taught, you are shown exactly what seat you must sit in, and you sit in that seat. And that same culture must be in school. Students must be assigned specific seats based on what the class teacher expects of students. What seat you're expected to sit in, what roles you must play in those seats. If you're in an exit row seat, what are your roles and what are your responsibilities? Where your emergency equipments are for breathing, for if the plane is to land in water, your life jacket. If power goes out on the plane, how do you still find your way to the exit? So clearly, a strong orientation for the students when they come to school, taking them through everything, including what do you do when your toothbrush goes missing. Sometimes we may think it is things that these students must know, but we must take them through every step. If your textbook go missing, how do you go about it? If a teacher doesn't show up in class, what are the steps they must follow? If you are sick, what do you do? How do you request for an exit? It requires sometimes a whole day or two of clearly defined orientation process that helps a student to settle while they are on board, setting the ground rules and consistently reminding the school community, parents, teachers, students about what those ground rules are. We usually will not see people misbehave during air travel because there is no room for ambiguity. There is no room for you to say, I didn't know what to do next. And usually it's because students do not know exactly what is expected of them, or they do not clearly believe that once they break the rules, the consequences for breaking the rules will be applied. If they don't believe the consequences will be applied, they won't do as expected of them. And then also doing periodic reviews of expectations of students, making sure that from time to time you remind them, put reminders on all in the school environment, reminding students of it, and providing learners with high levels of service while they are in. Once you're on a flight, high level of service. If you need water, food, if you need to use the washroom, everything is provided. Anything you need, you are quickly able to receive that service. And once our educational institutions begin to see that we are to provide service for our students, and that we have a clear environment for what is expected of us as institutions and what is expected of the students, it reduces indiscipline and it helps students to focus. And then supported learners fully and holistically to develop all of the things that are available within the school, sports and other extracurricular activities, support for slow learners, support for learners that require additional support, as well as gifted and talented learners that may need those additional things to make sure that they are still on top of their game. And then one of the key things, consistency and fairness, especially in the application of rules. Students must always feel and know and expect that once something happens, everybody will be treated in the same fair manner. That is critical to also ensuring that you set the right tones and it all leads towards improved and positive learning outcomes. Now, in airline travel, we will finally arrive at our destination. Once a person usually arrives at their destination, they just don't graduate, they just don't complete, or they just don't land, get off the plane and go anyhow. The airline still tells you where you must go to pick up your bag, what type of exit procedures, if you are doing an international travel, what type of immigration procedures, the airline will help you to understand. Sometimes the airlines, even before their plane lands, will tell you some of the great places you can see at your destination and all those things. So the same with us, taking the student through the entire process and helping them to know and holding their hand all the way through. When they are completing and graduating, we are ensuring that we are producing more independent lifelong learners. And so helping them to understand, even after you leave the school, remember the things that, we have been able to help you through. So moving to the next stage in life, what tertiary learning opportunities are available, the world of work, what other things can you do with the experience that you've had in our institution. And then even connecting the students or the graduating students to the old student networks that are part of your institution. So those are critical as well. It's just taking the student from the time they even think about becoming a student to moving them through, just ensuring that the tone is always set, that you have the right environment, the right rules, the right regulations to make sure that the students can move through without any ambiguity, because ambiguity is the #1 contributing factor to indiscipline. When people do not know exactly what to do, what is expected of them, and how to do it. But if we can take lessons from air travel, it will drastically improve the environment that students find themselves in, and then how they move through that environment. So with that said, what is next in maintaining order in our schools? I know that, prior to the ban of caning in schools, or after the banning of caning in schools, there was a lot of complaints, and especially on the side of us educators, us teachers, that our power has been taken away, and because we are no longer able to have corporal punishment in our schools, that it's leading to a lot more indiscipline. And for me, I think that what we also try to say in that is that we say that we are unable to have control if we are unable to inflict pain. But there are so many ways that we can maintain order, and rules and regulations, and ensuring that those are being followed, and ensuring that you have the right set of consequences that will be applied is critical. Now, one of the key things to maintaining order and ensuring that you have the right behavior happening with students also lies in how students themselves, how the staff, the adults, the teaching and the non-teaching staff respect the rules, maintain the rules, show up on time, dress properly, respect each other. You are not, you make sure that you are in tandem and you are in sync with your head teacher and with the leadership of the school. Once students see a well-oiled machine in how the adults implementing and operating the school are all working in sync, the students will have no examples of what misbehavior looks like. So it begins with us, the leadership, the adults, the teachers, and the non-teaching staff, and how well we are working together. Ensuring that, in maintaining order, that rules and responsibilities are clear for both students and for staff. And that staff are also maintaining and ensuring that they are doing what they have to do in terms of their responsibilities. And the rules are clear. Rules for everything. We may think that some things are just a no-brainer and people must know. But students must understand the rules and the expectations for every single thing. I have worked in schools that we have procedures for what, and this is a primary school, of course, but I've worked in a primary school where we had procedures for what a student should do in the classroom when their pencil breaks. Because you will also have students who are really nervous about the environments they are coming to. And they need to know, what do I do if this happens? What do I do when my slippers break? Where do I go to? Yes, we are preparing and developing people into young adults, but the world that we are going to release them into in our country, if we were to really follow all of the laws and the rules and the regulations, we would have a very well-ordered country. So it is about ensuring that we are following it within our schools so that we model that for the students as we turn them over into either tertiary institutions or into the society at large. Now, these responsibilities, especially for our existing secondary schools, there are some key existing staff and what we can do to ensure that they become the key holders of ensuring that discipline is happening in our schools. We have assistant heads, you know, as at now, we have the assistant head for academics, and in some institutions, assistant head for domestic, that is usually supporting in terms of providing discipline on a day-to-day basis. While we have the headmaster or the headmistress of the school, we have the assistant heads who usually will support that. We have guidance and counseling officers because while I didn't touch on those in my presentation, we have some students who may have, you know, behavioral issues, and those behavioral issues may be because of attention deficit. There's some of our students may have issues of mental health. They may have trauma in their past that may be contributing. So guidance and counseling officers are critical in terms of also ensuring that students are well guided both in their career as well as behavioral issues within our schools. And then, of course, we have our senior housemasters and housemistress, as well as housemasters and housemistress, and just making sure that we have clear responsibilities for them, and we continuously take them through professional development. And then we have our form masters, obviously. Then we have a student staff mentorship that if we are to strengthen it, you know, we have it. I keep using the example of Wesley Girls Senior High School in Cape Coast, but they have a strong system of assigning every new student to a particular staff within the school, and the staff takes the student through their entire educational journey. And that really supports the student to know that in addition to my housemaster, to my form master, and other people within the school, I have this one adult whose responsibility is to help me journey through my educational career at the school, and that they are able to fall back and go back to them for any support and to mentor them and to help them through. And then clearly, we need, as Ghana Education Service, to work more on professional development for our key staff to ensure that there is a clear competency that we are helping our staff to develop and to grow in, so that they can help to maintain order as well as maintain good outcomes in our schools, and then just providing support in general. I believe with this, I will end my presentation and provide opportunity for question and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tandoh, for that insightful presentation. Wow, and I think that so much has been said and you've shared so much information. I'm particularly, what's the word to do? Surprised how you just oppose the education system in terms of discipline to air travel. That's very good. Thank you for that. We've got a lot of a few questions coming in. I'm sure you were probably taking a sip of water so that we can get into the Q&A session. For those of us who joined us very late, let me remind you that this webinar series qualifies for a certificate, and the certificate is not analysis. So that we definitely confirm your registration by email. You can send an email and we will show you how you can go about it. While we get ready to get into the question and answers, I just want to read some of the comments that dear participants, you have shared. Very beautiful and educated presentation. Great presentation. Insightful presentation, Dr. Tandoh. Wow, great presentation. Kudos, Dr. Tandoh. So I know you're not just saying, participants are also confirming the fact that this has been insightful. Thank you very much. A few questions have come in, and Dr. Tandoh, I would want you to answer or comment on this. And I've also seen that we have some hands up, so I will call you when the time is right. But the first question is, from the context of the definition of discipline, where it says that training people to obey rules or a code of conduct. If that is discipline, how come discipline is seen as something negative, not rather training, but rather a sort of punitive action by our schools? What is your take on that, Dr. Tandoh?
Well, thank you very much, Nanefa. I think that it comes from, that we have to also look at this within our cultural context. And then also sometimes our belief system. A lot of us that are Christians will usually equate discipline to making sure that when someone does something wrong, that you correct them either through the rod or the cane or something like that. And that is how you discipline people. And most of us do not look at the whole idea of preventing the misbehavior in the first place, but rather correcting the misbehavior when it happens. And those are two different things. We know that children or people would always misbehave. And so why do we wait for them to misbehave before we correct it? Let me give you a good example, again, with air travel. And again, it's also about the expectations that we have of people. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to go to the UK, and I was traveling back to Ghana from London Heathrow. And we boarded the plane in London Heathrow. They usually, when you are boarding an international flights, they will board you in groups. And they make an announcement, a clear announcement that they will board groups 1, 2, 3, and so on. And in London Heathrow, of course, we were coming to Ghana. Most of the passengers that at least I was with, who were in the economy class, and most of the passengers were Ghanaians, speaking our Chi and Ga and Eve, and were in line. And the rules were that they will board in groups. I observed that nobody went to board the plane when their group had not been called. So everybody followed the rules. Nobody had to shout at them. Nobody had to do anything to them or anything. We got on that plane. 6 hours later, we landed in Kotoka International Airport. And at the immigration line, these same Ghanaians who were behaving so well in London Heathrow were in disarray. Because they felt they had come to an environment where they felt they had come to an environment where they could do whatever they want. But it is because of the expectation. And so we need to set the right expectations and set that expectation even in the minds of our students, that certain things will not be tolerated. And we are not going to keep shouting on the top of our voice, but we are going to expect them to do as we have communicated to them. And we will be consistent in the consequences when they don't meet those expectations. And I think that's part of it. And for us, for a long time, it has always been caning. We beat you, But I will be honest with you. I believe that my children are decently behaved. I believe that my children are decently behaved. But in my home, I have never raised my hand to beat my child. So for that matter, I have spared the rod, but my children are not spoiled. It is because my children have clear understanding of expectations in the home. And I think that that's what we need to look at, is how do we make sure it doesn't necessarily require inflicting pain, that we can train children to be disciplined rather than thinking discipline is when we beat them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tandoh, for that comment. And may I kindly advise that in answering the questions, if you can be a bit brief, because there are a lot of questions for you to answer.
Sure,
So
sure.
Thank you. Okay. So there's also a question here, and this is in relation to, I think, the research you cited before 2019, which says that 57.5% of students from low socioeconomic homes actually act out when it comes to indiscipline. Now, the question is, there are also students from well-to-do families who also engage in discipline acts. So where do we place this under why students act out?
Thank you very much. I think in Ofori's paper, and I can share that with you as well, he was looking at people's or the respondents' perceptions. So what he was looking at is, what are the respondents' perception around indiscipline? So, you know, there's always the statement that perception is reality. So as people perceived, that's what they think is their reality. So based on perception, while perception may not be the case, the perception is that when people come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, they are more likely to misbehave. Yes, misbehavior among students can come from all backgrounds. And even in that perception, it was only 57.5%, which is to say that there are people who think that there are still some 42.5% of the respondents who perceive that misbehavior is not only due to low socioeconomic backgrounds. But again, that was a finding based on the perceptions of the respondents at that particular time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so I also have a question here, and that's a very interesting one. So if schools have their own unique culture and clearly defined positioning, branding for attraction as you juxtapose to the air travel, how does it appear that in certain situations, other organs or institutions push these schools to compromise their status or principles as a school or institution? And this is in the context of the Rasta student and the Achimota situation, just by way of example.
Well, thank you. It's a very interesting and very important question. So thank you for that question. Now, the Ghana Education Service implements the education policy within a certain context. And that context is that we are providing education for every child in Ghana. Yes, schools have ethos, schools have their own culture and everything. But personally, on the issue of the Rasta child in Achimota Senior High School, I think it's also important for us to understand, if we have some older participants here, that prior to 1984, 1985, students didn't have to cut their hair to attend school. It was the implementation of a particular minister or secretary of education at the time who felt, you know, girls spend too much time on their hair, and that it is better if they cut their hair so that they don't have to. So, you know, over time, societies become transformed, societies change over time, our expectations and our understandings change over time. The issue of the Rasta student also had to do, of course, in terms of the arguments that ensued in court, also had to do with the students' religious belief. And so it was a matter of, will the school accept the student within the confines of the regulations of the school, while allowing any student to also practice their religion. So I think the agreement the school and the student came to at the time was that if you are going to keep your hair, you have to keep it within these confines in order for us to be okay with you settling within the environment of our school. So that what that also means is that ethos of schools transform over time. We've had schools that were either all boys schools or all girls schools, and now are mixed schools. And we've had schools that were mixed schools that are either now all single gender schools. And those are transformations of schools, ethos, schools, foundations, beliefs, and such. So once those things are not breaking the core values of a school, I think that as organs that are able to function within our society, which is always transforming, we need to be able to be open to seeing how we can transform while keeping our core. I'm not sure that, personally, again, I'm not sure that the hair of a student will negatively impact, and people have their own opinions, negatively impact teaching and learning in a school. But of course, it was a case that was also tested within our courts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tandoh. And I think that as an educational system in Ghana, we are evolving. So time and time again, we'll be tested with some of these uniqueness to see how robust or how versatile we are in terms of growth and evolution. I see we have some participants hands up. I still have a few questions, but I'll give them the platform to ask their questions. First of all, Sefam, can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Good afternoon, Dr. Tandoh, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for your presentation. So with the positioning, I think something like that exists, but just that is not structured properly. But I believe, like you have mentioned, it would be ideal for the schools to put those things in place before the students who do the selection. And when it comes to the other aspects of getting the school ready or setting the proper tone for the students, we could you made mention of Wesley Girls. I could also make mention of another school because I have a child in one. Yes. Aside the document that they share, the students are taken through a whole week orientation. And then an aspect of that orientation allows the parents to come through. You sit with your child, or the student will be at a place and you, the parent, will also sit in, and they take you through every aspect of the school so that the child knows that there are certain things you don't do when you are in this school. You don't hug, you don't sit in a car, even for visiting hours and your parents are there, you don't sit in the car because they can't tell who is a visitor and who is not, or who is your parent and who is not, to avoid all these things. So I believe that these issues or these things are already happening. There was something you touched on that I am a bit skeptic about. There was something you made mention of giving or assigning specific seats for students in the class. But I believe that per the educational need of that student, that would help you or warrant you to assign a seat. Because with the new curriculum that we are preparing ourselves to launch come 2024, the instructions on the lessons or the activities would demand how the class should be set. So this is where I'm thinking that based on the educational need of your learner, then the seats and other issues can be assigned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sefam. Just quickly, I appreciate that. And I wish that you could share the name of your daughter's school. And then also you would probably attest to the fact that based on this very solid orientation that they give students, there's probably less incidents of indiscipline among the students because they have a clear understanding of what is expected of them. And once you set those clear expectations, it reduces in discipline amongst the students. Now, on the issues of the seat assignments, I use that as an example, but if you heard me, I also mentioned the fact that it is based on what on each teacher or each instructor's understanding of the needs of the students. I don't know if you heard me make that submission. And it doesn't mean that when a student is assigned to a particular seat that they are stuck in that particular seat for the entire duration of their academic career. They can even be assigned seats based on class. So based on what the particular teacher needs. In chemistry, this student may be sitting in the front row, but once they get into English, maybe they are in the second or third row to the left or to the right. So the teacher's understanding of their learners is how the teacher will assign seats and help. Sometimes you assign seats also based on a student's behavior. You want the ones that misbehave not to go and form a ghetto in the back and misbehave. You bring them closer to you. So I hope that you heard me make that submission, that it is based on the teacher's understanding of their learners in that particular class.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Dr. Tandoh. I have Lava on with your hand up. Lava?
Yes. Hello, good afternoon.
Yeah, we can hear you. And please keep it brief.
All right, I will just do it. Thank you, Doctor. And then I'm Lava, the Regional Guidance and Counseling Coordinator for GS Water Region. Doctor mentioned ambiguity. I just want to have a clear of a situation, if we can situate certain idea I have in the course of doing my work. Are we good to say that wrong placement, a student having different courses that they don't have the interest in, where they have actually been wrongly placed in their various institutions or courses, are part of the ambiguity you are talking about? That's
okay.
Yeah, thank you. Lava, just quickly, I think that in the this is, and I am happy a guidance and counseling coordinator, but I think that once a student is sent to a school, even at the Ghana Education Service head office, we need to have a certain level of flexibility to allow the students, and I use that advisedly, a certain level of flexibility to allow the students and the school to make a decision, especially in terms of career trajectory. The new senior high school curriculum that we are going to be implementing in the next few years actually allows students to have that flexibility in selecting their career path or their educational pathways. And it provides them a lot more options in those educational pathways, rather than the rigid nature of our current curriculum that we are implementing. But yes, misalignment, students doing what they really do not like to do will cause that. I must also quickly add that within especially our social construct and within our framework in Ghana, we have a lot of students who their parents are living vicariously through them. What do I mean by that? The students themselves may not like a particular program, but their father or their mother at all costs want their child to be a science student. Their father or their mother at all costs, you must do general arts. So we have a lot more decisions being made by parents who think this is what is best for their children, rather than allowing the students to experience all of the different areas so that they can make a decision based on where they are having their best experiences and such. And we hope that this new curriculum provides that room. But our social construct allows a lot of parents to live vicariously through their children as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Okay, I can see some hands up, but please allow me to also ask the questions that has come through the Q&A. There are a lot of questions, though. So the next question is, how does the government ensure that the tone of students' discipline and behavior are not affected by the behavior of teachers? How does the government ensure that the tone of students' discipline and behavior are not affected by the behavior of teachers?
Well, thank you. I don't think that this is necessarily the responsibility of government. I think that usually we need to look at the individual schools. Schools and the teachers as well as the non-teaching staff within the schools, they set their own tones within the confines of their schools. Policies are to be implemented, but we interpret and look at the best implementation strategy for those policies. And schools set their tones within their schools. I actually do not think that it is the responsibility of government to ensure that teachers' behavior are either positively or negatively affecting students. What we need to do is to provide a robust guideline that allows the schools themselves and the management, the administration, the teaching and the non-teaching staff to look at what examples, what tone are we specifically going to set within our schools to ensure that the implementation of the educational policies are done. So I would rather say, let's look at what is happening within our schools. What are the teachers coming together to do to ensure that they are setting the right tones within the schools? What the government and headquarters of the Ghana Education Service would need to do is just to provide the resources and the necessary room and parameters for schools to operate more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Doe. Okay, another question, then I'll give the floor to those who raised their hand. The question is, how can the government make sure that educational colleges give aspiring instructors the training they need to truly comprehend pupils' behavior, especially when some of these pupils have psychocognitive and mental disorders?
Well, thank you. Now, I would say that we have a lot more work to do, especially around guidance and counseling and providing additional support within our school settings. Our teachers are fundamentally and primarily trained to deliver lessons using the right pedagogies in the classroom. They may have some foundational understanding of learning styles, learning behavior, but teachers are not teachers are not trained to deal with mental health issues within our schools. And so that remit falls, or that responsibility, I believe, falls within guidance and counseling and other support services within the school. So for that reason, I believe that government has more of a responsibility to work with the tertiary institutions to prepare more clinical counselors, guidance counselors with the right set of skills and trainings, and then create the room necessary to deploy them within our schools. As at now, our guidance and counseling staff that we have within the schools, we may need to work around maybe some retraining, especially around psychosocial counseling, working with the universities and tertiary institutions in the country that provide counseling and psychology training to help those guidance and counseling officers have the right competencies and the right skills and proficiencies to be able to handle more mental health or psychosocial issues that students may present, which may be beyond a teacher. So we have a responsibility to make sure that that burden doesn't solely fall on teachers, because they only have foundational training, and teachers' key and core roles are to focus on delivering teaching so that there will be positive learning outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Ben, I think I got your name correct. You have your hand up. Can you please ask your question?
Hello?
Hello, yes, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
okay. I am on the question of, okay, I'm Ben from the Timpani Education Office.
Okay.
I work as the head of supervision. Earlier on, Dr. mentioned of the research that shows that rioting and other indisciplined acts in segment schools, research was done and mostly they were children from poor homes, if I heard him right. So
No,
I
no.
am, okay.
Please
Ben,
go on.
so
Please go on with your question.
what is your question specifically? Then it can be addressed.
Ben, please unmute and go on with your question. Ben, you are muted. If you are speaking, you are muted, please.
Well, whilst we get Ben back on the line, Doc, there's a question here. How would basic school also eradicate ambiguity from learners as they are to model these learners before moving to the next level of education?
Hello.
I believe Ben is back.
Yeah.
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Ben, please, we are listening.
Can I go? Yes, I was saying, once you said it wasn't, that was not the presentation. I was thinking that if that is it, I wanted to also bring my own experience.
Okay. All right, Ben, there's been a question asked. So while I answer that, I will quickly touch on yours if it is okay. Nanefwa, is it okay?
Okay.
Please.
Okay, so Ben, the question was, how do basic schools also model to ensure that students begin to have a certain training or before they are sent on to senior high schools? Now, every school from preschool through kindergarten, primary, junior high school education before students get into senior high schools, every school must, should, and usually have well laid out expectations of students. If it's a basic school, simple expectations around showing up to school on time, raising your hand before you ask a question, asking for permission before you leave the classroom, making sure you hand in your homework on time, and all those things, listening to instructions from your teacher, knowing when to come back to the classroom after the bell is rung for either recess or break or lunch and such. So those rules and regulations that apply even in the basic schools, once the schools ensure that the students are following them, it conditions students when it comes time for them to enter senior high school or into boarding environment. So basic schools do have a major role to play in terms of helping students to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So it is critical that head teachers and teachers within basic schools also set ground rules within their classrooms for how and what is expected of students and when those things are expected of them. So that is actually critical to the foundation of preparing students into entering senior high school. Now, Ben, on your issue, I just wanted to again clarify the point. I talked about the fact that indiscipline can lead to some of these things, including student demonstration. But I didn't cite any research that connects student demonstrations to students coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds. What I did mention on that particular slide was to say that in a research done by Ofori in 2019, perceptions of respondents at the time was that the respondents at the time perceived that the higher levels of indiscipline can be connected to students who are coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds. And those are the perceptions of the respondents at that particular time, and not even Ofori had not made that as a fact, but rather the perceptions of his respondents at that particular time. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc, for clarifying that. Okay, I know it's a few minutes to the top of our time, but Doc, there are a lot of questions that you need to give us an extra time to deal with it. I'm just presenting you.
We are fine.
So there's a question from Clement, which says that can GES come out with clear-cut rules and regulations governing all schools to assist learners know their responsibilities and what is exactly demanded of them?
Yes, the simple answer is yes. We do have, our schools already have student guides. And while it is long overdue, the Ghana Education Service Management, working with our staff, especially CHAS, are working on code of conduct for students. It is long overdue. It should have been released by now. And we are hoping that we'll go back to make sure that all of the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. And that provides a general framework for code of conduct for teachers, as well as a code of conduct for all of our staff to understand expectations of ourselves as well as of our students. So the simple answer is yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. And I believe that the question has been answered. There's also a question from Callistus, who says that in a situation where the senior housemaster, with the help of the guardians and counseling coordinator, has tried their best when it comes to indiscipline in schools, what other strategies could be employed?
Well, one of the key things is that sometimes we operate in a vacuum. I have seen time and again within different institutions that I have worked in, where people have, again, a perception of what some rules and regulations are without really understanding what the rules and regulations are. So even in a school where you have serious issues of indiscipline, I believe that a reorientation of the entire school community can help you. You know, you can press pause, the school reopens for the next academic year, or they come back from midterm, and you decide as a school community that you are going to go systematically through the rules and regulations as laid down by the school. And maybe at that point, say everybody has a clean sheet and we are going to start all over again. But these are the clear rules, these are the clear regulations, these are the clear consequences for each of the violations of these rules. I think that you can either press pause or press restart, take your entire school community through a reorientation, and then begin afresh as though it is a whole new school you are beginning, and that can help. You know, you just need to get people to know what is expected of them. And for the management and administration of schools, you just need to be clear about being fair and consistent in the application of the consequences assigned to the violations of each of the rules and regulations laid down within the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. And following from that question, this is also a similar question. What do you do as a school when you have done all the needful, yet some students exhibit indiscipline?
I think that question is similar to the one we just looked at. It's a matter of sometimes the school may decide that over the break, maybe a midterm break or the Christmas break or something, the staff will come back a day or two early and agree on exactly how you wish to run the school when students return. I'll give you a quick example. When I was appointed to Obuasi as the executive director of schools at Anglo Gold Ashanti, I inherited a school that had so many challenges. And one of the key things I decided to do was to reorient my staff to understand that we have a new school. And this is how the adults within the school are going to run that new school. We went through everything, reoriented ourselves around student behavior and everything. We invented ourselves. And the first day when students entered school, we took them through major orientation about the old new school that they have come to meet. And we saw drastic changes immediately. So it's a matter of leadership within the leaders of the school, bringing the teachers together and letting them know, come October, December, January, when students return to school, this is the direction we want to go in. And we've spent 2 days, we've spent 3 days, and we've decided this is where we're going to go, and we're going to orient our students in that direction. And we are all hands on deck to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan, I see your hand up. I'll call you at the appropriate time. But I just want to say good afternoon to my Director General, Dr. Michael Bachiado. And he says a great presentation, Dr. Tandoh, and he has a question for you. How would you describe the disciplinary situation that's among students, tutors, and school heads in our SHS and SHTS system currently? How would you describe the disciplinary situation?
Well, I would say, thank you, Doc, for that question. I will say that we have a situation that, as I said earlier, it's highlighted or exacerbated by the levels of news and the speed of news, the penetration of social media, that makes it seem that we have a high deterioration of discipline or high levels of indiscipline in our school. I do not think that the levels of indiscipline in our school has escalated beyond what is uncontrollable. However, I would also say that we need to recommit ourselves as management in education, as teachers in education, as non-teaching staff in education, to arresting the issue that has become more, the issue that have become more, people have become more aware of. So we need to be able to do some introspection, look at what exactly we need to do and what clear steps can we take, which of our existing roles within our schools can support in ensuring that we clamp down on our perceptions of high levels of indiscipline in our schools in recent times, so that we can provide the right professional training and development for them, professional retraining where necessary, academic as well as other forms of support to ensure, and then also seeing where we can bolster the skills and the strength of our staff to make sure that we have a more well-oiled machine within our schools in that sense. So that would be, that's how I would describe this, the situation of the disciplinary situation within our schools.
Thank you, Doc. Dear participants, thank you very much for staying with us, for your comments, your questions. Ideally, this is where we would have said goodbye because our time is up, but we still have some questions and we still have some hands up, and I know Doc will gladly answer all questions for us. So
yes, I'm still here.
We are continuing. And Abigail Jewu, I see your hand up. Can you make your comments or contribution? Madam Abigail Jewu, are you still with us? Okay. Okay, so Doc, there's a question here, and it says, what is the position of the—
Sefam has her hands up though.
Yeah, I'll call Sefam. I still have a lot of questions, so I'll give you another.
Yes, please, I'm still here.
So Abigail, please go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Madam Abigail. Okay, I think I've lost her. Whilst we wait for her.
Just have a question. I think an officer from my office asked a question.
Okay.
Not me. It's a start. So I think when you go through all the questions, he'll get his answer.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Abigail. Okay, so there's a question here. What is the position of the Education Ministry in religious activities in senior high schools, especially during Sunday general worship? Is it compulsory for all students, especially Christians, to attend such social gatherings? If yes, then what should be done to students who refuse to attend such gatherings? There are situations where students are given corporal punishment for not going to the dining hall to eat, but are left alone to do whatever they want during Sunday morning worship. That's a Hydra question.
Yes, it's a very good question, and thank you, Sebastian Kofi Osei, for that question. Now, your question is asking me to put on the hat of the policy body, which is the Ministry of Education, and I work for the Ghana Education Service. So I would answer this question within the context of the Ghana Education Service. Now, our position is that schools offer holistic education. And in that holistic education, it includes the academic development, the physical sports development, the co-curricular development, as well as spiritual growth of students. Now, we also need to understand that within the context of our education here in Ghana, our missions have been a strong foundation in the delivery of education here in our country, both Christian and Muslim missions. And those missions within the confines of the delivery of the education allow for students to be able to have strong spiritual growth when they are in school. Now, once a student enters a school and agrees to attend that particular school, the student is guided by all of the expectations of the students within limits. So, for example, if you go to Islamic Senior High School and you are a Christian, Islamic Senior High School, as a young lady who is a Christian within the school, they may give you some concessions around the hijab, but they will not prevent you from wearing the hijab if you are a young Christian girl who is attending Islamic Senior High School. They would not force a young Christian girl to fast during Ramadan, but if you wish to, they will provide you the support. However, they encourage, as a form of spiritual growth for all young Christian girls, to attend a prayer. Prayer is prayer. And so the same way on Sunday worship, it is part of the ethos of the school. And so it is an expectation of ours that any student who chooses to attend a school where part of the school's ethos include a Sunday service, a general Sunday worship, it is our expectation that that student will abide by those rules and will attend that Sunday worship because it is part of the holistic education that we provide to students. Now, do I believe that the schools should resort to corporal punishment for students who either do not go to Sunday service or do not attend to dining hall? I don't believe so, but the schools should look at what consequences can be meted out to students who refuse certain general school gatherings that are expected of them. So that would be my answer. So the position of the Ghana Education Service is that as part of our holistic education, the spiritual growth of a student is part of that holistic education, and we expect students to partake in such. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Stefan, kindly go ahead and ask your question. If you're still with us.
Yes, I'm still with you. I'm really enjoying the discussion. It's not a question, it's more of a contribution. Please, am I allowed?
Please be brief because our time
Yes,
is
please, I'm trying, I'll try. So I remember last year, somewhere in September, there was a Transforming Education Summit where it requires us to refocus and reimagine what we need to do as a school. So as we are going through this transformational journey bringing up new policies and other things. Everything about our educational system as a nation is changing. And I believe that if you are committed to it and we go through it, some of these indiscipline issues would curtail. Doc made mention of attention seeking. Attention seeking could also be a cry for help, where the child is actually in need of something. But the best way he or she thinks he can get that is to be indisciplined, quote unquote, so that you can put your mind on him or her and then be able to help. So not all indiscipline issues should be tackled as negative issues, but it might be a cry for help from the learner. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I still have a lot of questions for you guys. We are very
We are patient. We are here.
good.
Safam, can you mute?
Okay, so when is GES publishing uniform rules and regulations, code of conduct for school students as a guide to augment the positive discipline tools?
Well, thank you. I think that question came from an anonymous attendee. And what I would say, I think I had answered that question earlier in terms of where we are. We are working with CHAS. I believe it's long overdue, as I mentioned. But we hope that within the next, before the next academic year, we would have something more concrete.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's also a question here which says that, do you believe having basic schools, that's all levels, KG, primary, and JHS under the same head, rather than having primary and JHS under different heads, can help promote discipline in our basic schools?
Well, I don't think that the organization of schools under heads in terms of whether it's KG primary or primary junior high school is either it's a negative impact on discipline in our schools. I believe at the end of the day, it's about leadership, and that leadership begins actually in our classrooms, and then it moves up to the school, and so that school can just be primary 1 to 6. And once there is a strong leadership culture within that school, the head teacher, the class teachers within their classrooms, you would begin to see more positive behavior among students. Junior high school 1 to 3, same thing, you begin to see more positive behavior among students. So either the headship or the schools are combined or separated. It's not, I don't believe that's what impacts discipline or indiscipline, but it's about the leadership culture that is developed within whatever context of school that we are describing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think I'm going to talk about these 3 questions, then I'm done. All the other questions, please route it to our emails and we'll direct them to Dr. once, and then we will get back to you. The time is fast then. So this says that from the orientation, effective orientation promotes discipline. Could it be possible for students to be offered admission at least a month to resuming, to enable all admitted to participate fully at orientation? Most students are often left out due to late reporting.
That is also very true.
Hold on that question. I think this one also got to do with student enrollment. And it says, may I know from Doug whether the high enrollment in SHS, HTS is not contributing to the frequent discipline recorded nowadays in our schools. So we're talking about enrollment and discipline and numbers.
And orientation. Okay. All right, so the first question around, could it be possible for students to be offered admission at least a month to resume in order to enable students participate fully in orientation? Yes, we are hoping that that's where we'll get to, where students would know their schools well in advance. it will require on our part to run a more tighter ship, especially around when exams or BEC is written, how quickly we mark that BEC and how quickly we go through the placement process. We are confident that we will be able to get to that point very soon where students know their schools well in advance. What we may also need to do is actually to quickly close the gap, especially around protocols and students moving around, to make sure that once students are assigned schools, a limited amount of time is given to them to move around. And then that allows schools to know their full complement of school students earlier and plan stronger orientations that involve all of those students. So yes, that's possible, but it will require some work on our part, which we are willing and are working on doing. Now, in terms of enrollments, and if enrollments are a contributing factor to indiscipline in schools, I don't fundamentally believe that high numbers of students lead to indiscipline. I believe that it is about how we manage those students that come into our schools. We have seen organizations and schools have as high as 4,000 or 5,000 students, yet low levels of indiscipline. So at the end of the day, I would continue to say, I believe it's about how we establish expectations within those schools, but not necessarily that increased numbers may lead to higher incidents of indiscipline. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. And I think this is all time will allow us. I still see the questions coming in, but please, time is fast spent. There are also comments that have come in. Discipline can still be maintained in schools without corporal punishment, and this point was made. And also,
is it okay if I answer the question on the Dean of Discipline? Just so, because I know some people may be worrying. A gentleman by the name of Godwin Yao Ogudi asked the question, what is the Dean of Discipline going to be doing differently from what the senior house staff is doing already? Now, Godwin, I think it's important to understand that since the Director General's communication to regional directors on the appointments of the Dean of Discipline, there has been a subsequent meeting and communication with all regional directors to stay the execution of that decision so that we can go back to the table and see the best way that that can be done. I can assure my colleagues on here, as well as the general public, that we are working to ensure that within the existing structure of the staff of senior high schools, that we put together a team that supports the head more effectively. And not only do we put together that team, but provide them with the right set of skills and trainings through partnerships like IEPA to retrain some of our key staff to ensure that they are maintaining a more positive environment for our schools. So I just want to put it out there that Director General has since communicated the stay of the execution of that directive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tandoh, and thank you for your patience and for answering all our questions for us. Dear participants, thank you for once again registering for this webinar. I know that, that has been the history Dr. Tandoh has delivered, and we've learned so much from him. And your comments and questions have also enriched the discussion. Thank you very much. I saw a comment asking for the number for certificate. Yes, you can send us an email requesting for a certificate for this particular topic with Dr. Tandoh, and the number is 100 Ghana cedis, and you can send to a Vodafone cash wallet 050-522-1092, and the till number is 37414 5. If you didn't catch that, use the email that you received confirming your registration to connect with us, and we will also communicate with you on how best you can receive your certificate. On behalf of the Director General for IEPA, Dr. Michael Bochiadom, the Executive Committee and Management, I want to say thank you to you, Dr. Kwabena Tandoh, for your time, for your research, to putting out this presentation, and for your excellent delivery. I've learned a lot, and I know we've all learned a lot, and we'll always count on you when the time is needed to also come and share your experiences with us. This is just the beginning of many such engagements. So
always available.
Thank you, Doc. Let me also inform you that if you registered for this webinar, we have your email address, and by next week, we should be sending you the slides from Dr. Tandoh. And the recording for this particular webinar is made available on our YouTube channel. It should be up by next week. And the handle is IEPA-UCC, and all the other webinars are on the IEPA-UCC YouTube channel. You can go and listen to all the brilliant presentations by our resource person. Until we bring you the next webinar, somewhere at the end of this month, the July edition, let's keep engaging. Let's keep providing quality education. Let's keep sharing ideas so that we can all transform our educational system to make it better. As we have signed up to SDG goal to provide quality and lifelong learning and equitable education, let's all play our part in a little small way, shining light wherever we are to ensure that we transform education for the better. It's been a pleasure hosting you, Dr. Tandoh. My name is Nanifa Roxanne, and until we meet again at the end of the month for July webinar, thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.